Before we get into it, we have what we call the community agreements that we go over to try to make sure that we to make sure that that everyone feel comfortable in the space. So there's 6 in particular, and then we crowdsource from the audience to see if we want to add another community agreement. Would anyone care to share one of the 6 community before I can even finish?
Sorry. Step up, step back. When someone's trying to explain something, take your time to kind of listen and let them explain, and also step up, interact, get involved in the conversation. So know when to step up and when to step back.
That's good. It's very important. A lot of times you have people who, take up a lot of space in discussions. So we want to make sure that, if I'm taking up a lot of space, that I'm giving time for other people to also share themselves. And if you're not comfortable sharing, know that Allah gave you something that will be of benefit to the community. So don't feel shy about, sharing your perspective. Any other? That was step up, step back. That was one. I like to ask people to share it so I don't have to say it myself. Number 2? Vegas rules, okay. This is enough. Okay, that sounds a little, what's Vegas rules, man? Who said that?
Chatham House rules.
Chatham House rules? What is that? Break it down.
Well, if someone, says something in here, we don't necessarily repeat it ourselves.
Good point, good point. People might share things in this room, in this gathering, that they don't want you to, post on Instagram, be like, see what this brother said at that day? We want to make sure we be mindful of that. Someone might share something in this room that they don't want you to talk to them outside of this room about also. So you don't want to be like, I saw you last time I heard you say such and such. Can we, listen, I shared it in that space. Don't come to me after that. Maybe I don't want to talk about it outside of that, So that's something to keep in consideration. Number 3. Oh.
He beat you to it, I'll catch you.
Dang. So whatever you feel. Sorry.
We need to have a whole aesthetic thing. You know what I'm saying?
So,
the coffee cup,
You want to sit right there?
Yeah. You sure? You good?
Number 3. Old friend mentality. Bismillah. And what's the old friend mentality?
So treating people with the warmth that you would an old friend, and not kind of embarrassing people or being like, oh, you haven't been to any events recently. Like, why? Where have you been? So kind of just being warm and friendly and welcoming.
Exactly. Definitely. Old friend mentality. Whether someone's coming here for their first time or they've been here a long time, you want to show people that love and that camaraderie. And, if you're having a discussion and you notice there's somebody, perfect shot, mashallah, and you notice that there's somebody who maybe is in the corner, no one's talking to them, include them into the conversation, So we try to keep that camaraderie going in the community. There's 2 more, yeah?
Break it down.
Can you break that down? I don't understand what you're talking about.
So just make sure whatever you're saying, if it's a perspective or another language, make sure that it's familiar and understood by everyone. If I'm saying inshallah, then maybe someone might not even understand what that means. Maybe translate it or explain it. Or if my perspective is I come from an engineer background and someone's coming from maybe a poetry background, maybe we're not going to connect because I'm explaining it in a way that is familiar to me, but not to everyone else.
Yeah, break it down for us poets, you know what I'm saying? Break it down, Shafala. Definitely. And it could also be an English term also. It could be a technical term. So, sometimes, people say things that we may not be familiar with. So, we encourage people to encourage the speaker or even the person because we break up into different groups and have discussions, to break down whatever they say if you feel that it would be easier for people to understand. Kind of help with the understanding of the discussion. I think there's one more community agreement. Bismillah. Don't yuck your yum. What do you mean by that?
So basically,
Don't yuck your yum.
where everyone's coming from. Just don't be judgmental. Kind of be open-minded. Let everyone have their say or their ideas, and be welcoming to that.
Yeah, we don't have to agree on everything because we definitely don't. That's out of the box. But we don't want to create an environment that's hostile to people who are trying to grow and learn. We want to be mindful that everybody's at different places, we got different perspectives, and especially when you're in an environment where there's a lot of different people from different backgrounds. Bismillah. Oh no worries. Yes, so my head just popped right back at the door. So, with that being said, we'll go over a brief bio. So regarding Imam Shadid Muhammad, is the Imam at the United Muslim Masjid.
That's old.
Uh-oh.
Need to update.
Well, one thing is for sure, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm saying this is for sure. Imam Shadid is a graduate from the University of Medina. MashaAllah, okay, which is significant. Alhamdulillah, he's one of the beautiful luminaries we have in our communities out of Philadelphia, and what?
Wrong again.
La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.
I'm from New Jersey, actually.
From?
That's pretty much the same thing.
You know,
Blasphemy, no.
Blasphemy. Wait.
No, nobody from New Jersey would agree with that. No consensus.
And one last poem, some last comments, and then I'm gonna just be like, brother, please share your bio real quick. No, this. So he provides classes, seminars on marriage, family, community counseling, and lectures on a wide array of topics. All dissemination is based upon the Quran, the authentic Sunnah, and the methodology of the pious predecessors. And he's okay. So 50-50. Okay. Let's hope I don't get the coffee wrong. Without further ado, we'd like to welcome our brother Imam Shadid Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. First, let me just say that I'm honored to be here. Any place that I get an opportunity to come and share what little bit of information that I have is greatly appreciated, especially when you reach a point in your career or in your journey where a lot of doors close on you because of the things that you say and because of the stances that you take. You're appreciative of any door that opens and welcomes you in and allows you to come and speak your truth. The second thing is that, the premise that you guys set here, I think is awesome. I wish we could kind of just start all over in the Islamic community. Like, I'm a convert, so I kind of just walked into, the mess that was already here in the Muslim community, right? And it's like, I'm now, at a point where I'm just like, can we just go all the way back to when, immigrants started coming here, Muslims started leaving the nation of Islam and embracing more. Can we just kind of go back to that point and then just start all over? Because there were a lot of steps that were missed. And as a result of that, we have kind of lost so many generations of Muslim children who have gotten lost, who have chased away from Islam as a result of a lack of what you guys just did. Setting a premise that, speaker comes doesn't necessarily mean that, you have to, and it's sad that we actually have to state that. We have to say that out loud, right? That should be your inside voice, not the outside voice, telling you that you don't have to agree with everything the speaker says. It's a shame that we actually have to state that. You know what I mean? I thought that was a given. I thought that was understood. And then we'll get someone who, will sit and say, I don't agree with what he said. Okay, well, you're entitled to that. I mean, that's, your God-given common sense. Anything that someone says that you disagree with, I mean, there were many things that the Prophet ﷺ gave to his companions at a time when they weren't ready to receive it. And, they couldn't understand, when the Prophet signed the peace treaty of Hudaybiyah, and from the outside it looked like the Muslims were kind of taking, the lower end of the stick. And even Umar went up to the Prophet ﷺ afterwards and he said, aren't we the ones on the truth and they're the ones that are on falsehood? The Prophet said, yes, of course. He said, so why do we always have to take the lower end of the stick? He wasn't seeing the big picture, which is why, some of the Sahaba, one of them, they had a statement that Khatib an-nas bima yafhamun, speak to people in a language that they understand. Right? Aturidu an yukadhib Allahu wa rasuluhu. Do you want people to disbelieve in Allah and His Messenger? Meaning, if you give them information that is beyond their ability to process, it may cause them to begin having doubts about Allah, about His religion. You understand? So, that I think that what you guys did here was great. You set a tone so that once the conversation starts, you automatically know how to process information. And unfortunately, this has, my frustration with this has driven me to avoid, at this point, giving public lectures. I actually don't give public lectures anymore. All of my lectures are kind of been converted into private courses that I give online with a certain group of students who, many of whom have educational backgrounds, have been to higher learning institutes. Because one of the things I realized that when we go to a musalla, go to a masjid, and we begin giving a lecture, everybody that is sitting in front of you does not have the intellectual ability to follow you. Your references, I mean, mind you, when you're giving a lecture, especially if you're well-rounded as a lecturer, you're not just giving Islamic references. You're giving references from books and previous information that you had, experiences. And if someone who has never traveled anywhere, and you're giving like a reference to something that you experienced in South Africa or something like that, they're not going to be able to follow you on that. If you're giving a reference to a particular book, or a particular subject that people are not familiar with, they're not going to be able to follow you. If you're speaking to people who, many of whom have, are reading on a very lower level in terms of their reading and comprehension, they're not going to be able to follow. And then, I mean, the list, I mean, the people who follow you, like, you're just using the process of elimination as you speak. And then you realize that you end up with this huge problem that 75% of the people sitting in front of you don't understand where you're coming from. So it's easy for them to just simply say, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about, you need to go back and learn Islam. It's like, really? After a 45-minute lecture and all I gave you was references from Quran, Sunnah, in other places. And so it really is frustrating. But I am really pleased to be here. I'm honored to be here. And hopefully at the end of this talk, inshallah ta'ala, you guys will have, I will have stimulated your mind a little bit more as it relates to the topic that we're going to talk about. The topic that was given to me was a play off of one of Prophet Muhammad's statements, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli," pray as you have seen me praying. And so we played off of that, and love as you've seen me love you. All right. Although those are not the words of the Prophet ﷺ per se, but we can look at his history, we can look at his legacy, we can look at his interaction with his companions and see how he demonstrated love with his community, right? Right or wrong? So we're just playing off of the statement, pray as you have seen me praying, and we're using that to show or to demonstrate how the Prophet ﷺ loved his community. So I'm going to begin with a hadith. Everything that I quote in Arabic, I am going to double back and quote it in English. All right? So I don't just give things. I like to quote Arabic. I know one time I was given a khutbah at Howard University, and afterwards a brother ran to Instagram, or he ran to Facebook, and he was like, this brother came and gave this talk and he's quoting all of this Arabic. We're English speakers. Why is he quoting all of this Arabic? And I said, well, number one, it makes more sense to me in Arabic than it does in English. If you understand Arabic, then it just sounds, the eloquence of it just sounds better. And I understand it better when I quote it in English. So for me, it's a comfort zone. Number two, for many African Americans who have never had the opportunities that I have had to go overseas and study Islam and learn the Arabic language as a second language. I'm not talking about learning Alif, Ba, Ta. I'm not talking about learning an entire culture, because culture and language go hand in hand. Many African Americans, such as myself, who come from where I come from, never had that opportunity, and probably will never have that opportunity. So for me to get in front of a crowd of people and quote Arabic, I give people hope that if you know my background and know where I came from, then you would know that it is possible for anyone in this room to learn Arabic. You understand? All right. So let me start with a hadith that is collected in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ gave us a metaphor, so to say, of the love, mercy, and compassion that exists or should exist in the Muslim community. I think that we need more love in the Muslim community. What about you guys? I think that that's a huge component that is missing in our communities. I think love is a huge component on a plethora of levels, not just in terms of our interaction as Muslim brothers and sisters, but even in our households, amongst husband and wife, between parent and children, parent-child relationships. I think that love is a component that is definitely missing. All right. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتراحمهم وتعاطفهم كمثل الجسد الواحد." He said the example of, and the Prophet's teachings were so profound in the way that he would give metaphors and give you references and things like that that help you understand clearly what he's trying to say. He said the example of the believers and their love for one another and their mercy for one another and their compassion towards one another. كَمَثَلِ الْجَسَدِ الْوَاحِدِ. It's like one body. So envision this now. Imagine what he's saying here. He's trying to give you an idea of the ideal Muslim community where there's love, compassion, mercy, where these components exist. He said it's like a one body. He said, إِذَا اشْتَكَ مِنْهُ عَضْوٌ, that if one part of the body aches, then the other parts of the body are up at night with sleeplessness, wakefulness, and trying to help that part of the body that is suffering. All right, so if you think for a moment, if you've ever had a cold, right, you've ever had the flu, all right, your body is working tirelessly to repair itself. Your white blood cells, if you cut yourself, right? Any medical doctors in here? Any physicians in here? Anyone in here? Pediatricians? Anybody? No? What you guys into? Okay, so you have white blood cells, right? That rush to, the areas of your body that have been damaged. And this is why you should sleep, because the longer you sleep, the quicker your white blood cells can heal that part of the body that is damaged. So the Prophet ﷺ is trying to give us a vivid example of how the Muslim community, in terms of their mercy, compassion, and their love for one another, how it works. That when one part of a body aches, the other part stays up, is suffering from sleeplessness and wakefulness to try to hurry up and repair that part of the body. One part suffers, the other part suffers. That means that when, for example, as we see what is happening in Sudan now, right, we don't just scroll past that and act like we didn't see that. We are in pain. That is the example of our love and compassion. When we see what is going on in Syria, right, we don't just scroll past that, no matter how painful that is. I don't necessarily particularly like and share that type of stuff. I don't. It's sufficient for me to look at it and be affected by it, hate it in my heart, and try to change it with my tongue by going into sujood and making dua, right, for those who are being oppressed and against those who are actually doing the oppression. That is how you can change something with your tongue. As for changing it with our hands, you can march and you can protest, but I don't see how that necessarily helps the people in Sudan or the people in Syria or the people in anywhere else. So after leading with that hadith, I usually like to go to a quote or two. I'm a stickler for quotes. Henry Miller, he said, the only thing that we never get enough of is love. And the only thing that we never give enough of is love. You guys agree with that? Our desire for love is insatiable. We can never get enough of it. And we can never give enough of it. And the reason why we can never give enough of it, anyone want to take a shot at it? Why don't we ever give enough love? Whether to our spouses, our children, our family members.
Well, I hope this stay on topic, but it's easy to love somebody, mom, father, but it's even harder to love somebody you dislike. Imagine we had the same love for somebody we dislike, something to get along with. So.
Okay, so there are variables to love. Like, sometimes we pick and choose who we're going to love, right? That's one of the reasons.
Unforgiveness.
What about it?
Sometimes if you haven't forgiven someone, like deep down inside, it's hard to really choose that love flow through you to those people because you have a grudge. And as we know, when we don't forgive, our love, even between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes there's a barrier.
She
You
just
know?
gave my whole lecture.
Oh. so.
Right, very good.
Yes.
So there are a lot of obstacles. The reason why we can never give enough love is because there are obstacles to love. There are obstacles to giving love. Sometimes we withhold love because we like to be in control, right? Not only that, we don't like to be hurt. I don't want to give love to someone and then not have it reciprocated, right? So one of the things that we do in our entire lives is that we try to control how much we're going to give love to those whom we share our experience with, because it's comforting to know that we are in control, and we like to guard ourselves from being hurt, considering that love is the greatest vulnerability. Love is absolutely the greatest vulnerability. Because in order for you to love someone, you have to let your guard down. Right? That's a vulnerability. You're looking like, yeah, I've been there before. However, what we don't realize about love is that the more that we withhold love from others, the more that we are denying ourselves the love of others. To your point. The more you withhold love from others, the more you are denying yourself the love of others, as well as the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As she mentioned that the love of Allah is contingent on loving His creation. All right? So there's a concept here that I'm going to go, and that is that giving in order to receive. That you have to let something go in order to get what you want. And Allah uses this concept as it relates to sadaqah, as it relates to charity in the Quran. Allah says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. That you will never achieve righteousness until you give what you love. Follow me. You will never attain righteousness until you give what you love. So you have to let something go in order to get what you want. You guys follow me? Does that make sense? All right. So in the Islamic community, it's unique that our community, the Islamic community, was built upon and repeatedly described in the Quran and in the Sunnah with the characteristics of love, mercy, and compassion. Allah says in the Quran, Muhammadun Rasulullah. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم. And those who believe along with him are أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ, are stern and firm with those who disbelieve. رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم. And they are merciful between themselves. There's a level of mercy and compassion, meaning that the Muslims amongst themselves, they deal with each other differently than they deal with those outside of their circle. And unfortunately today, because of a lot of the ignorance that we have kind of welcomed into our communities, that you'll find Muslims who will show more love to non-Muslims than they will their own kind from amongst the Muslims. And it's really sad. It really is sad. That we would park in the middle of the street, jump out and see our homie, our homegirl from high school or whatever, high five in the middle of the street. I ain't seen you in years. And meanwhile, we walk right past another Muslim and don't even give them the salams. That's our reality today. Allah says that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Those who are with him are stern and firm with those who believe, those who disbelieve. رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُمْ. And they are merciful between themselves. However, many people who have embraced Islam, and I'm a convert to Islam, so I've had my own share of experiences with this, but many people who have embraced Islam, as well as some of those who are born and raised Muslim, have had horrible and unhealthy experiences with love, right or wrong. I'm sure everybody in this room has had some horrible experience, some unhealthy, not necessarily horrible, but unhealthy experience with love in our lives. Sometimes we were introduced to love in a very unhealthy way, right? Because love is a vulnerability. So if someone wants to take advantage of you, they will throw love on the table, right? So, and this is especially true for women. You guys, men that learn this very early on, learn to use love to manipulate women. Because you guys are maternal from the very beginning. My daughter here, 3 years old, she's pushing her baby in the stroller. She wants to be a mom from the very beginning before she even understands what it is. And boys who figure that out early play on that. Right? They don't want a relationship. You want a full-out relationship. All he wants is what he wants from you and to keep it moving. So men who learn that, and women as well, I'm not saying that, it's not an anomaly. Men are not the only ones that do that, but we're probably the best at doing that. All right? But many people who have converted to Islam, those who are born and raised Muslim, have had very horrible and unhealthy experiences with love. Or no experience with love at all, making it very difficult for them to exemplify the many commandments in the Quran and the Sunnah and our religion to express love and a plethora of capacities, whether in marriage, whether in friendships, companionships, whether in parent-child relationships, to the end of it. Our religion is a religion of love. So if you've had no experience with love prior to Islam, or you've had horrible experiences with it, it becomes very difficult for you to exercise love in a religion that requires you to love. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhibba li akhihi ma yuhibbu li nafsi," that none of you truly believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. But let's just say you don't love yourself. You convert to Islam, or you're released from your parents' home out into the Muslim community, not having any concept of love whatsoever, whether self-love or any other type of love. How do you exemplify this commandment from the Prophet ﷺ? The Arabs, they have a saying, فَاقِدُ شَيْءٍ لَا يُعْتِي, someone who doesn't have something can't give you what they don't have. So then this same individual wants to get married. Meanwhile, they have no concept of love whatsoever. Not self-love, not external love that is given to other people, none whatsoever. And I'll get to an example, as there were examples in which the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated love in front of someone who didn't have a concept of that type of love. And the Prophet ﷺ had to correct that. All right? There was an example where he was kissing his grandsons, Hassan and Hussein. All right? And this, notice that when the Prophet ﷺ did things like that, it wasn't just haphazard. It wasn't just coincidental. Everything that he did was targeting something from their pre-Islamic culture that he was trying to change. All right? He was a leader in every sense of the word. All right? Not just a leader, a transformational leader. All right? There are different levels of leadership. Transformational leader. So that means that every step that he took, every decision that he made, every move that he made was designed to change some form of pre-Islamic cultural nuance that was conflicting with Islam. All right? So he's kissing his sons, right? His grandsons. And so one of the companions looked at him, a man by the name of Aqra ibn Habis, who was a Bedouin. They, pre-Islamic Arab culture, even today, they don't show boys that type of affection, right? They don't show boys that type of affection, all right? I am an Islamic studies teacher in an Islamic school that is predominantly Arab and Pakistani, right? And I deal with boys on a regular basis, and some of the things that they express is really sad. That parents, fathers in particular, you can see from amongst the boys, many of them have daddy issues. There's this void that father does not validate him, right? So he says to the Prophet ﷺ, "Tuqabbilu al-awlad?" Do you kiss the boy children? The Prophet ﷺ said, yes, kiss the boy children, the male children. So he said, "Wallahi inna li ashratun min al-awlad ma qabbaltu minhum ahad." He said, "Wallahi, I have 10 sons. I have never kissed any one of my sons." No concept of love and compassion, at least not in that capacity. I'm not totally dismissing that altogether, but in that capacity. He said, "I have 10 sons. I have never kissed any one of my sons." And the Prophet ﷺ looked at him and he said, "Man la yarham la yurham." He who does not show mercy will not be shown mercy. Meaning, the more you give, the more you get. He who does not show mercy, and any parent right now who is alone, at home, sitting by themselves, and they're going to die lonely As parents, you're going to die lonely. And for those of you online listening right now, there are tons of Muslim parents right now that are going to die lonely. Because when your children were small, you didn't take the time out to nourish that need for love and compassion and mercy. You were very rigid with the religion, very stonewallish, very stoic. And as a result of that, the moment your children get out of your home, they are never coming back. Coming back to visit parents like that is a duty. It's a job that they don't want to do. And it's really sad because I am a victim of that. I was raised in a foster home. Both of my foster parents are dead now, right? And I can say with all due respect, alhamdulillah, because they scarred me for so much of my life. I'm still today repairing some of the damage that they did to me. The beatings, brutal, for the smallest little infractions, never a conversation, nothing. My conversation with you is with a belt. And as a result of that, the moment I left that home, I never stood foot except one time, and that was to give them da'wah, to call them to Islam. I felt like I would be doing them an injustice for Allah to guide me to Islam, and at least not go back and invite them to Islam. And I said that once I was going to do that one time. And wallahi, I went back and I gave them da'wah, I called them to Islam, and I never stepped foot back in their house ever again. And I believe in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I did my duty. Because I didn't actually have to extend them that. Because if Allah wants guidance for someone, whether it's me or someone else, Allah will guide them. But these are some parents who are going to die lonely because of this. The Prophet ﷺ said to the man, he said, he who does not show mercy will not be shown mercy. The more you give, the more you get. You guys understand that concept? The more you withhold, the more you deny yourself. Everybody clear about that concept?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about how love in real time looks when you share it and you express it with other people, right? The Prophet ﷺ, on one occasion, he was standing with a man and another man walked by. And he turned to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya Rasulullah, inni la uhibbu fulanan. He said, O Messenger of Allah, I love that brother. I love him. And the Prophet asked him, Hal balaghtahu. Have you ever told him that you love him? And the man said, no. The Prophet said, Akhbirahu, go tell him that you love him. Here again, the more you withhold, the more you are denying yourself. Because if he goes and expresses to that person, hey man, I love you. Guess how that relationship is going to change. You understand? And there's many of us, especially as men, right? We feel very uncomfortable. We always got to do the disclaimer, I love you for the sake of, dude, I know it's for the sake of Allah. You don't got to say that. Because if you weren't Muslim, I wasn't Muslim, we wouldn't even know each other. Our paths would have never crossed. So obviously, for the sake of Allah goes without saying. I don't have to use that disclaimer. I'm totally comfortable with telling another man, I love you. I'm totally comfortable with that. I'm good with that. I make my sons uncomfortable when I say that to them.
It's going on Instagram.
Huh? It is. It's all good. It's all good. And, and we have to learn how to be comfortable in our masculinity and understanding that that does not infringe on you being a man to look another man. The Prophet ﷺ told, I'm going to give you some examples of where he looked other men in the face and told them that he loved them. And he was the man of all men. So why is it that we are so uncomfortable with this word love and understanding the implications of it and how it's going to change the dynamic of our relationship? So the Prophet ﷺ said to the man, he said, did you go tell him that you loved him? He said, no. He said, go tell him that you love him. So the narration mentions, so he went to the guy and he said, Inni uhibbuka fillah. Here again, he said, I love you for the sake of Allah. And the man said, Ahabbaka Allahu alladhi ahbabtani lah, which is the response that we should give when someone does say, he said, right here, brother. Sit right here.
He was saving it for you.
Huh?
Yes.
As you wish. So he went to the guy and he said to him, I love you for the pleasure of Allah. And the man said, may Allah love you for whom sake you love me. All right? May Allah love you for whom's sake, and that's the proper response. You can say, I love you back. You can reply back with that so that the person's love feels validated. But at the same token, you want to make dua that Allah love you for even telling me, for even having the courage to come to me and tell me that you love me. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala love you as well. So, can you imagine what this did for their relationship, right? How does their relationship change now? If I walk past a brother in the masjid every day, right, and the only thing we extend to each other is salam, but I observe you, I look at how you're on time for the salat, how you always sit right after the salat and you make your dhikr, and I enjoy watching you, observing you, and I look at you and you are a reminder to me of the things that I need to fix about myself, because the believer is a mirror to another believer. We mirror to one another our imperfections, right? Our relationship would just remain like that if I don't ever come up to you and tell you how I really feel about you. But the moment I come up to you and I stop you in the wudu station, I say, brother, what's your name? I said, my name is Abdul Hakim. Abdul Hakim. My name is Brother Shadid. I just want to let you know, man, I love you, man. When we see each other after that, how is our relationship going to change?
He might avoid you altogether.
Just got weird.
Right, this just got weird, right? Okay. All right, so other than it being weird, how else would this situation change? That's going to grow. He might say, I really appreciate that, man. I love you too, brother. Hey, listen, I'm having an event over at my house, or, I'm looking for this. Your relationship now morphs into something greater than just the mundane Islamic relationship of seeing one another in the masjid. And the same thing with women, the same thing with sisters. Why are we so stingy, right, with our love? Here again, trying to control, trying to, make sure no one hurts me, right? And you can't jump out there and do this unless you become comfortable with yourself, right? You got to be comfortable with you first. Otherwise, all of what I'm saying, you're going to say to yourself, yeah, that sounds real good, but I'm not been there before, right? I'm not jumping out. No, I'm joking with you. I'm not jumping out there and exposing myself like that, and that's that fear. But when you are comfortable, like, I love you, the Prophet ﷺ, did he not have love for some of his enemies? Absolutely. Did the Prophet ﷺ not make dua for people that were trying to kill him? Right. It was very comfortable. Umar bin al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the day that Umar took his shahada, Umar was on his way to go kill the Prophet ﷺ. Yes. The day that Umar took his shahada, he was on his way to go kill Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet made dua for Umar. He said, "Oh Allah, guide one of these two men who you deem will be a benefit to Islam. Either Amr ibn Hisham, Abu Jahl, or Umar bin al-Khattab." And Allah chose Umar. Umar became the man that he became solely because of the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was not his best friend. He was a clear enemy to Islam. Clear enemy to the Prophet ﷺ. So, love, and that's a whole other level, learning how to love your enemies. That's a whole, we don't even love our friends. Like, we can't even get past that stage first before we start talking about loving your enemies. That's a whole other level, right? So, and the Prophet ﷺ, he was, this is why he was very open and generous with his compliments and his I love yous with his companions, because he knew that would help change the dynamic of their relationship. It would go from being just your leader to now being your leader / your companion, your friend. And it would make people more receptive. And in the Islamic community, imams are only friends with, their close circles. If you're not within his close circle, his constituency, then you're just another lay person that comes to the mosque to pray. That's it. But we're talking about transformational leadership. And if you're going to transform people, right? We come in, we're trying to transform environments. So we open up a masjid on this corner, we chase away the drug dealers, the prostitutes, and mashallah, clean the corner up. But we do nothing for cleaning the hearts and cleaning the souls and cleaning the characters of the people that we are serving. That's not transformational leadership. That's pseudo leadership. And that's what we've become accustomed to. So now when someone walks into the office of the imam, you got to make an appointment. You got to get a pass, hall pass, to, even step in the imam's office, right? And if depending on how he feels about you, whether he knows you, whether he knows someone who knows you, will determine the level of service that is granted to you. And that's not everybody. I'm not generalizing, but in most people, and our experiences testify to that. All right. So the Prophet ﷺ was very generous with his companions and open with his love for them, because he was bent on changing the narrative of this, this stoicism and this rigidity that, defined pre-Islamic Arab culture. They were very rigid, very harsh people. We're talking about people who used to bury their daughters alive. Burying your daughter. Just imagine your wife giving birth and your wife coming to you and telling you, hey, it's a daughter. And your face frown up because you're embarrassed. How are you going to take this child into the community? People are going to talk about you. And so instead of doing that, you bury the daughter in the ground, alive. Allah says, وَالْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. And when the baby girl will be questioned on the day of judgment, for what sin were you committed? What sin were you killed? For no other reason that you were a girl. Right? That's it. Condemned. Just on the basis of your gender. This is their culture before Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ, we like to paint this picture that it was all roses for him. It wasn't. We're talking about a man who majority of his children were what? Girls. You think that was a coincidence? That was not a coincidence. Abdullah Ibrahim Qasim. The rest of his children were girls. Zainab being the oldest. Kulthum, Ruqayya, Fatima being the baby. Majority of his children, he was trying to raise girls in an environment where girls were looked down upon, frowned upon, right? Buried alive, just on the basis of their gender. And he's trying to raise his daughters in an environment like that. Don't you know when he started promoting Islam publicly, I believe it was Abu Jahl, whose two of his sons was married to Kulthum and Ruqayya. And to shame the Prophet ﷺ, he told his sons to divorce the Prophet's daughters. And his sons divorced them. And the Prophet married Kulthum to Uthman. And then when she died, he married Ruqayya to Uthman. And Uthman is given the nickname Dhu Nurayn, the possessor of two lights. The Prophet told him, if I had a third daughter, I would marry her to you. You understand? So, the Prophet ﷺ was trying to change the narrative that defined pre-Islamic Arab culture. So on one occasion, he was asked by Amr ibn al-As, he said, O Messenger of Allah, man ahabbu nas ilayk. He said, O Messenger of Allah, who is the most beloved person out of all of the people to you? This is asking him public. This wasn't a private conversation. This was something that was said in public. O Messenger of Allah, who amongst all of the people do you love the most? And the Prophet ﷺ, asking for clarification, he said, do you mean from amongst the men or the women? Right? This is a little tricky. Speaking truth to power, right? Everybody not built for that. So he said, right? Picture a man, having multiple wives and being asked, which one you like the most? And him just coming out and saying what it is. Like, not today. Not in today's time. Well, I love them all the same. They all, The Prophet ﷺ said, from amongst the men or from amongst the women? He said, from amongst the women. He said, Aisha. Hands down. I love her more than anybody else. He said, well, what about from amongst the men? He said, Abuha, her father. More than anybody else. He made no issues with that. Very clear. So now how does that change the relationship between him and Aisha? How does that change the relationship between him and Abu Bakr? Absolutely. Telling someone you love them or expressing verbally how you feel about someone changes the relationship completely. On one occasion, he said to Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he said, Ya Mu'adh, inni wallahi uhibbuka. He said, Oh Mu'adh, he said, I love you. Got a lot of things to sip on over here. So, right? Got tea, water, coffee. What's in the blue bottle? Okay.
Sparkling water. Vegas rule.
Well, it's on Periscope, so.
Sparkling water. Sparkling water.
Well, they'll add that to the list.
Sparkling water.
I'll repeat that again. This is sparkling water. Next thing you know, you'll see a picture on Instagram with Shadid Muhammad like this. See stuff on all the brothers drinking alcohol, inviting the Muslims to alcohol. But he said to Mu'adh, Mu'adh, Wallahi, uhibbuka fillah. I love you for the pleasure of Allah. He said, and don't forget to say at the end of every salat, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadati. Oh Allah, assist me with remembering you, with perfecting my worship to you, and being grateful to you. But he led with, I love you. And that teaches us a point. As I'm dealing with marital couples, I tell them all the time, if you want to get your point across, lead with, I love you. It lets the guard down. Love is the ultimate vulnerability. You want to get your point across, put the person's guard down. I love you. Honey, I love you. However, I'm not jumping off that ledge with you. All right, but you led with I love you, which means that they can receive now what you're trying to say to them in a more gentler way. They don't take offense to it. You guys following me? Like this, Islam is not rocket science. This is not something that we need some great sheikh out of some, mystical place to appear with a turban on and a white thobe on to guide us to Jannah. That's not Islam. The Prophet ﷺ empowered his companions that even the most lay person from amongst the Sahaba had just a basic general understanding of how to worship Allah and how to live in this world with the people that you share the world with. That doesn't require, we get so caught up in the commercialization of Islam. You're waiting for some great sheikh to walk through a door with a turban on and a big gray beard and is going to sit down and open up this dusty old book with a whole bunch of Arabic in it and is going to take you to Jannah. That is not necessary. That's a figment of your own imagination. And my job, and I'm just trying to debunk these thoughts, these superficial thoughts that we have, especially as converts. Because when I was a convert, I thought that every woman who wore hijab and wore niqab was married, and every man that had a beard was knowledgeable. That's what I thought. And some people just automatically assume that. And we believe that we need, some great, and that's not to say that we don't respect our scholars, Islamic scholars, but I think that the pedestal that we give many in Islam, I think is really to our own detriment. It's almost like the Jesus syndrome. Like we raise scholars and people of knowledge to this degree where, we can't exist without them. And I'm sorry, once you fall in love with the Prophet ﷺ, you don't find another man that's on that level. I don't see another man on that level, ever. Ever. I remember when we were in the Islamic University and Sheikh, would give a lecture or whatever, and then after the lecture, scholars would, students of knowledge would walk over and kiss the Sheikh on his forehead, and, and I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. You can call me an eyeball all you want, but I'm not doing that. I respect what he said, and I took my notes, and alhamdulillah, I got from him what I needed from him. That's it. All of this adoration and this, elevation and this, making you more than what you. I'm sorry. Once I learned who the Prophet ﷺ was, and I fell in love with him as my messenger, as my leader, as my prophet, I don't see another man on that level ever. So, in continuing, the Prophet ﷺ saying to, there's a quote I wanted to give you guys by a scholar by the name of Manawi. He said, Ar-Rahma fil khalq riqqatul qalb. He said, mercy in the creation is indicative of a soft heart. Now, when you find someone that's merciful, compassionate, loving, you find that his heart is soft. He said, وَرِقَّةُ قَلْبِهِ عَلَامَةُ الْإِيمَانِ. And a soft heart is indicative of faith. Now, when a person has a soft heart, it is an indication that they have faith. وَمَنْ لَا رَأْفَ لَهُ لَا إِيمَانَ لَهُ. And he who does not have compassion does not have faith. وَمَنْ لَا إِيمَانَ لَهُ شَقِيٌّ. And he who does not have faith is wretched. فَمَنْ لَا رَحْمَ عِنْدَهُ شَقِيٌّ. So he who does not have mercy is wretched. So there's a connection there. When you find people that lack mercy, lack compassion, right, that is an indication that there's some type of nuts, some type of deficiency in their faith. Because faith and mercy and compassion, that goes hand in hand. So when you find people professing to have all of this great knowledge, imams that have all these great knowledge, and then, women are complaining about the lack of compassion and mercy, it's like, how does that knowledge and information translate into mercy? How are we translating our knowledge, our information that we are receiving about the religion? How is that translating into how merciful and compassionate and loving we are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creatures? I'm just about done. So if the Prophet ﷺ said to this man, he's in another narration, he said to the guy when he saw him kissing his grandsons, and he said, "You kiss your sons, the boys?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "Wallah, I have 10 children, I've never kissed any one of them." The Prophet said, "Well, what do you want me to do if Allah has removed mercy from your heart?" Basically what he's saying is that if your life experiences have unfortunately robbed you of the ability to show love and compassion and mercy, then who is it that can repair that? Who can replace that? All right? There's nothing that I can do about that. All right? So love has an element of reciprocity in that the more you show love, the more you will see it manifest. However, that's not with everybody. There's some people who take your love for granted, right or wrong, right? Which is why we withhold. I'm not extending that to everybody. Who are the people who take your love for granted? I don't mean the individual people like your cousin, your aunt. I'm not talking about individuals. Who are the type of people who take love for granted? Huh? Those who serve? They take your love for granted?
Narcissists.
I don't think that children take love for granted. I think children just...
Teenagers.
Even teenagers. She must have teenage children.
No, I'm not even a parent. I shouldn't be teenagers.
Oh, you're a teenager.
So I'm like a community worker, community member,
take your love for granted. I don't think children take... I just think that where they're at in their developmental stages, they're not able to appreciate it. Right? Many of us don't appreciate our children. They say that impulsivity in boys doesn't begin to decline until they're 25.
So I consider myself a child. So I take my mother and my father, unfortunately, for granted. So I couldn't do that.
Right.
And I'm their child.
But you will get to a point in a stage in your life, especially when you become a parent at some point, where you will now be able to make the connection. Right? Once you go through that process of delivering a child, now you know firsthand exactly what your mother went through with you. You know what I mean? And it changes the narrative completely. That I'm sure of. All right? So I don't think children necessarily take love for granted. I just think that they're just too immature to process it. But something my wife mentioned, a narcissist. Very good. All right? Unfortunately, and there's a bunch of them running around America. Right? I wish I could put a stamp on their forehead so that you could see it before you even come in contact with them. Right? And they're some of the worst people. And unfortunately, this is what America is producing today. A whole society of, sociopaths, narcissists, where the world revolves around them. They're, they scroll past a page or whatever, gotta leave a comment. Like, you don't have to comment on everything, right? You can just scroll past and keep it moving. You don't have to comment on everything, but you're going to leave a nice little comment here, right? I don't know who needed to hear this. Well, guess what? No one needed to hear that. Keep your comment to yourself. No one needed to hear that, right? So a narcissist doesn't process love well. Who else takes love for granted?
People who have power.
People who have power. Why?
Because they think they're entitled to the love of the people. They think that is why they have power.
So she said that people of power, people in positions of power, and that comes with a sense of entitlement. Well, that would be a narcissist as well.
Ignorance.
Some people who are ignorant of love.
Like, you talk about love our enemies, they don't even realize, like, this person loves me after I said something nasty or mean to them. Like, if you look at, like, the social groups, maybe like a far-right group or a hate group, we still love them, we don't like what they do, it's okay. So maybe they
Okay. So someone who doesn't understand love. Someone who doesn't understand it. Someone who has had a unhealthy experience with it. All right? And they believe that love is taking advantage of people. That's not love. Yeah. Donald Trump? Well, interesting individuals. I think Donald Trump's, you have to understand something.
Nobody
you got to go to the root. Go to the root of it. Donald Trump, I believe he behaves the way that he behaves because of things that were done to him when he was a child. He wasn't born like that. That was created. That was a monster that was created. Yeah. So, understand that love has the ability to change situations, much like forgiveness and any other quality, any other emotion. And the evidence for this, the evidence for the way that you extend love to other people and the way that it's reciprocated is seen in the way that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they loved him even after his death. And why I say that, because some people only love you while you're alive. That's a fact.
True.
Some people only love you while you are alive. And once you are gone, then the love is gone. Right? But when you look at the Prophet ﷺ and his relationship with the Sahaba, they loved him even after he was gone. Long after he was dead and gone, they still loved him. All right? Because love, true love, should endure even after your demise. As the Prophet ﷺ said, there are 7 people who will be shaded by the shade of Allah on the day where there will be no shade except the shade of Allah. And one of those 7 is Rajulani Tahabba Fillah. There's 2 people who love each other for the sake of Allah. Ijtama'a alayhi wa tafarraqa alayhi. They unite upon that and they separate. The only thing that separates them from that is death. Even Imam Ahmed, who was one of the students of Imam Shafi'i, he said, ما زلت أن أدعو للشافعي وأنا في السجود منذ 40 سنة. He said that I have never ceased to make dua or remember Imam Shafi'i in my sujood for a period of 40 years after he was dead. Can you imagine making dua for someone every time you go into sujood by name for 40 years after they're dead? That's love. Love endures. True love endures beyond the boundaries of death. If it's real love, it would continue on even after the person is no longer here. Which is why when Aisha said to the Prophet ﷺ about Khadija that, why do you keep talking about this woman who died, old woman with no teeth in her mouth? And the Prophet turned to Aisha and he said, what did you just say? Now mind you, Khadija's dead. Aisha is one of his wives at that moment. And he's checking a current wife about something she said that was insulting about a previous wife that was no longer alive. That's love. Because if she's dead and gone, somebody would kind of just let that ride because she's not here to defend herself. But he defended her. He said, what did you just say? He said, Wallahi, you are not better than her. He said that she believed in me when nobody else believed in me. She called me truthful when everybody else called me a liar. She aided me with her money when everybody denied me their money, and she had all of my children. So you are not better than her. You understand? Put her right back in her place. Kindly. Even after Khadija died, the Prophet ﷺ, one day Khadija's sister came to visit the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet would honor her the same way that he would honor Khadija. And Aisha used to get angry and upset. Like she said, there's no woman, this woman, even after she's dead, still got me in my feelings. I've never seen my husband honor a woman like I've seen him honoring Khadija, and she's dead and gone. Her sister comes to visit the Prophet. He sits her down and honors her in a way that he would honor Khadija. And when he would slaughter an animal, he would also take pieces of the meat and he would give it sadaqah to Khadija's friends. Because that love is extended to the people that she loves. That's love. Love doesn't just stop with the person. All right? Which is why we can't be friends if you cool with my enemies. Because if you love me and you know that this person, and it's a legitimate dislike, it's not just some personal beef, this is a legitimate dislike. How could you go and rub shoulders and shake hands and smile in the face with people that you know I hate, and then turn around and say, we cool? Nah, we're not cool. Because your love for me should extend beyond me. You should love the people I love, and you should hate the people that I hate. But we are individualists in this day and time, so it's like, well, you got a problem. I don't got no problem with you. Now I got a problem with you. Right? Because if you don't have a problem, if you don't have a problem with my enemies, then you are now one of my enemies. That's just my philosophy. You don't have to abide by that. And I'm talking about legitimate beef. I'm not talking about skirmish here or there, some disagreement or whatever the case may be. That's cool. I'm talking about some legitimate wrong, injustice that was done, and you still rub shoulders with people that you know have done an injustice to me or have done wrong to me. That has solidified our lack of friendship at that point. So what I'm saying is that many of the companions, they love the Prophet ﷺ even after death. I'm going to give you 2 quotes, and then I'll end. One was a statement that was made by Bilal. And the Prophet ﷺ showed Bilal honor beyond what any human being ever did for Bilal. Not that he freed Bilal. He didn't free Bilal physically from the bondage of slavery. Abu Bakr did that. But what the Prophet ﷺ did was restore Bilal's honor amongst the people. So when the Prophet ﷺ conquered Mecca, right, and everyone is standing around, right, the Prophet ﷺ turned to the crowd and he says, where's Bilal? Bilal said, I'm here, O Messenger of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said, Qum Bilal, go and stand on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan. The Arabs are literally heated. A'udhu billah, how are you going to let this Arab, how are you going to let this slave stand on the Kaaba? The Kaaba is the most sacred, mind you, before he became a prophet. They were going to kill each other over who was going to put the black stone in place, right? That's how they honored the Kaaba. And you're going to let this black slave stand on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan? The Prophet ﷺ knew exactly what he was doing. Everybody that looked down on Bilal now had to look up to him. He did that purposely. Restore what was taken from him. You took his honor. You took his dignity. It wasn't just like slavery existed in Islam, but there were rules to that. You could not prostitute the woman out. There are ayats in the Quran that mentions that if the slave woman wants to be righteous and pious, you cannot pimp her out. As some of the Arabs, they used to take slave girls, Jadi, a slave girl, and they would pimp her out. They would sell her, make her go sell her body and keep the money, which is something that still goes on today in many Muslim countries. Still goes on today. Absolutely. It was prohibited. That slaves had certain rights, and they were also given the opportunity to purchase their freedom, to earn their freedom. But the Prophet ﷺ was restoring his honor after it was taken from him. But when Bilal was on his deathbed, he said to his wife, or his wife said to him, وَحَزَانَ oh, woe is us, you're about to die. And Bilal said, بَلْ تَرْبَهُ. He said, no, this is a good thing. He said, غَدًا نَلْقَى أَحِبَّةً. He said, tomorrow I'm going to be with the people that I love anyway. Meaning when I die, I'm going to be with the Prophet, I'm going to be with Abu Bakr, I'm going to be with Umar. It's like, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. I'm about to move on, transition from where I am to go be with the people that I love. In another narration, Aisha, she said that when death came to Abu Bakr said, Ayu yawmin hada, what day is this? And it was said to him, Yawm al-Ithnain, it's Monday. And so Abu Bakr said, فَإِن مُتُّ مِن لَيْلَتِي فَلَا تَنْتَظِرُوا بِي الْغَدِ فَإِنَّ أَحَبُّ الْأَيَّامِ وَاللَّيَالِ إِلَيَّ أَقْرَبُهَا مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. He said that if I die tonight, he said, what day is it? They said Monday. He said, if I die tonight, he said, then don't wait till tomorrow to bury me. He said, bury me immediately so I can go and be with the ones that I love. He said, because the most beloved days to me are the days that I am closest to those whom I love. That's a concept that we can take right now and lead with. And that is that the most beloved days to you in your life should be the days that you spend time with the people that you love and that love you. And Fairland, in reality, most of our days that we are happy is when we are spending time with the people that love us and we love And he's talking about, obviously, in a different realm. He's talking about in a different perspective. He's talking about in the event of death. Abu Talha, who was fighting alongside the Prophet ﷺ during the Battle of Uhud, don't you know that the sword came down from an individual about to hit the Prophet ﷺ, and Abu Talha stuck his hand out to block the sword, and as a result of that, Abu Talha lost his whole entire hand defending the Prophet ﷺ. That's love. I'm not saying you got to go slit your wrists to prove that you love someone, but that came natural. That's just naturally, when you love someone, you don't even think about it. You just respond, right? You see someone that you love is in pain or whatever the case may be, and you rush with protection. And Abu Talha had to live the rest of his days with one hand, with one arm, one hand, and it was a reminder to him that I lost this hand protecting the Prophet ﷺ. That makes it very easy to live with, right? Suad ibn Ghiza, he put his face on the stomach of the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ was lining the Sahaba up for the Battle of Badr, and he had a stick that he was kind of straightening the rows because the Sahaba used to line up like they lined up for Salat. The Salat was training for war, if you didn't know that. The reason why we line up in ranks like that, very steady, very, straight, is because that's the same way that the Sahaba used to line up for war. So if you are constantly, accustomed to lining up for Salat and straightening your ranks and things like that, when it comes time for war, you're already prepared. Meanwhile, our ranks go like this. We crooked from the beginning of the rank to the end of the rank, which is indicative of how we interact with one another, which is why we can't seem to, rush to the aid and assistance of one another when we need it, right? So this companion, Suad, when the Prophet ﷺ was poking the Sahaba with a stick to try to get them in line or whatever, he asked the Prophet ﷺ to lift up his cloak. The Prophet lifted up his cloak and he put his face down on the stomach of the Prophet and kissed the Prophet's stomach. The Prophet asked him, why did you do that? And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لأن فأردت أن يكون آخر أهدي بك أن يمس جلدي جلدك فدعا له النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بخير. He said, because I wanted the last thing that I touched was to be you before I die. I wanted the last thing that I touched to be you before I die. That's love. We're about to go to battle. I don't know if I'm going to die. I don't know if I'm ever going to see you again. I want the last thing that I touch to be you, O Messenger of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ. So everything in this world we love, we see. However, we will never see the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, even though we love him more than anyone in this world. Think about that. Everything that we love in this world is things that are tangible, things that we can see. People, things we love. We can see it. We will never see the Prophet ﷺ, although we love him more than anything and anyone in this world. And this is just tip of the iceberg, man. I could just keep going. I mean, the examples just go on and on. My question to you guys now is, why don't we see love manifesting the same exact way in our communities? And how can we restore that element of love in our communities? Twofold. Yes.
I'm a new convert as well. I haven't been listening that for 2 years. And one of the things as a new convert that I felt like was very helpful is to learn to meet people where they are. I feel like a lot of times, we expect for someone's DNA to be all the way right here, and I'm still a newborn baby. And so I feel like if you meet a person where they are, like, when I first came to the masjid, I met a group of sisters. It was because she was criticizing me, right? She thought I was Saudi. I'm African American. And she came to me and she said, where are you from, sister? And I was like, here. No, where are you from? And I was like, here. And she was like, I thought, same. I thought if my father was down, I'm cool to pray. So I'm just trying to hold on to the deen. I'm like, it's Isha, I gotta make it in the masjid, because nobody else around me is Muslim. So I'm praying. I got cuts in my little jeans and my knees. And she was judgmental. And it was another sister who came to me, and she was just so soft and she was so gentle, and she didn't judge me. And she took me in and she grew me. And I feel like a lot of people who are either falling off this thing or even new to this thing, when people don't meet them where they are and embrace them with love and without judgment, I can't hear you through your criticism. And I feel like when you just come to somebody with love, I come from a Christian background, and I'm not saying that I agree with everything, but whole entire speech. But when you come to somebody and you look at them as your child, if you look at them as another human being who maybe is suffering, then you can have a little bit more empathy and you can speak to them with love. So I feel like in our community, if we can just be less judgmental and more loving and approach people with love, that people may be more responsive to adjusting the hijab, fixing their garments, straightening your lines. Sister, I've heard people be really nasty and rude. Nobody responds to that. So I feel like, and lastly, I've heard a lot of differing about rules. As a new Muslim, it's just like, like if I'm standing for prayer at Jumu'ah and the sister's foot doesn't touch my foot, alhamdulillah, I'm just gonna keep praying.
Right.
So it's like a lot of bickering about small rules. It's like just meet people where they are and guide them through example and through love. And it's like if you stay steadfast, alhamdulillah, somebody's gonna be attracted to your life.
Good point. Meeting people where they are. I've heard that before. But yes, I think that you have a great point. Anyone else? Why? I mean, let's not focus on the why. Let's focus on the solution. How do we restore love, compassion, mercy in our communities?
So I was raised in kind of the South Asian community, and I find that religion is more an institution of power, control. Where I'm from, the Pakistan, and I feel like that's pretty prevalent, that it's not used to further ethical or moral principles and guidelines from trustworthy prophets and explain the Quran, but rather as an institution where certain people impose power, and that has been translated to the U.S. as well, since they brought to us by our parents and those other same times. For me, I think I went away from religion when I left the home and when I went off to college because it just, it was toxic, it was painful, it was always like I'm getting yelled at, so it took me about a decade to come back to it. Wow. But, it was, so I think that avoiding, and I think you mentioned the point that, we take these scholars and hold them to this high degree when we should hold them to the same level as anyone else, with a critical eye on their opinions and on their references, and as one would judge any other scientific or scholarly paper or argument. So I think that the religion really needs to take a hard look at what it makes people's lives.
Okay, so not using the religion as to create this power structure where it's like I'm here, you're there, and because I know and you don't know. Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. The only problem with that is that many of the masajid, that power structure is really hard to break that down, because the not necessarily with the imams. I think some of the imams are very balanced, but I think the problem comes in when the imam starts to look at his service as a job, as an employment, right? Then now the emotion is detached from it because it's just a job. I'm just here to do my job, right? So you don't speak truth to power when it needs to be. You allow nepotism. You open the door for nepotism. You just kind of let things slide because there's no heart and soul in it anymore. It's just a job. And the worst thing that has happened to many of our masajid is the boards of administration. That is the absolute worst, in my opinion, the worst thing that has happened to our masajid, because it becomes this tug of war of who's going to be in power, and the head of the board, and the board administration, and this person and that person, and that's where the power structure is created. And to be honest with you, many of them are just not necessarily in the best interest of, there for the best interest of the community members. They're there for the institution, the building itself. And the Muslim community is more than just a building. We're hearts, souls, that are crying out for help, for assistance, guidance. And we have a whole bunch of people who are fighting for a position to run this building, to be in charge of this building. And that's what it has been reduced to. Not in all, but in many. But that creates a lack of love as well. So there's no loving environment because it's all business. It's business. So a sister comes and she has multiple children and she needs sadaqah. And it's like, okay, well, I need to see this, paperwork. And it's just like, my electricity is about to get cut off at any moment. You're asking me for all this paperwork or whatever. We can do all of that. Like the money's not going into my pocket. You can go pay the bill on your own. And just, and I can bring you all the paperwork later on. But it's just business as usual, And a lot of the masajid becoming 501c3s, non-for-profit organizations, that also contributes to the whole business component of the way that our masajids are ran, So, those are just some things. I'm not going to be the one. We're not going to change the world in this one sitting. But perhaps there's somebody here listening. Perhaps there's some resources in this room that, perhaps this information will reach. And perhaps, our job is just to my job is just to put the information out there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of the result. None of us control the result. We just do the action, right? Allah told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. You didn't throw when you threw, but it was Allah who threw. The Prophet took a handful of dirt and he threw it. And that handful of dirt went into the eyes of 1,000 soldiers of his enemies. And Allah told him, you didn't throw when you threw, but it was Allah who threw. Meaning you did the work. The result was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't control the result. Anyone else? How do we change this narrative? Yes.
Wa alaikum salam. I wanted to say some of the things that you were saying that I've been in school quite a long time, and I lived in Saudi for a while too. And one of the things that I see that's really missing today is that we always had community activities. We had social programs right within the neighborhoods. We had so much stuff to do that we didn't have the time to get to everything. You know what I mean? And if we didn't have something to do, we created Islamic programs and activities. And it wasn't on a large scale. It might have been my house, it might have been a disco center. We kept it going all the time and kept the families together. And we spread it amongst the community, non-Muslims and Muslims alike. And I don't see that happening. We're losing all our troops. We're losing them. Everybody's got a cell phone, everybody's going here, going there, but when you talk about Islam, no love. No love. You got to give love in order to get love. And I see that, and it's not about money. Seriously, it's not about money. I traveled in Saudi Arabia, believe me, I done put $13 in my pocket and had all my bills paid for. Jamila testified to it. When I got there, everything was waiting. Allah had it waiting. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that you step out on faith. Don't worry about, that you got to take all your money and do all this stuff for what you want to do. Spread it around, and show by example that you are a true Muslim. And you'd be surprised that everybody's salam alaikum, salam alaikum. I get so many salam. I don't know who these people are. I'm serious. Only other community. Because it's my activity of who I am and how I share and interact with them. I speak to them. I give them good nasiha. It could be the drug dealers, it could be the gangbangers. It doesn't matter. You got to be a light that represents Allah, servant, his slave. And Jamil is picking up the ball now with Ar-Rahman. And there will pass the light on.
So basically what I'm hearing is that we need to do more Islamic outreach. We need to step outside of the masajid and go out into the community and begin bringing these people, not necessarily back to the masajid, because in some instances some of the masajid is part of the problem, but creating spaces outside of the masajid where we can cultivate and nurture this element of love and compassion and community, and then allow, empower them to be able to move on their own, to stand on their own feet, to move on their own. You know what I mean? But this whole idea of bringing everybody back to the masjid, until the masajid fix their issues, until the masajid, remove the toxicity that is in many of these so-called sacred spaces. I'm not a promoter of masajid. I love using facilities like this, using spaces outside of the masajid. I'm actually more comfortable there. I don't have to represent a particular, like you go to a masjid and it's like you advocating for them. I might be there just to give a lecture. I might not agree with anything that goes on in the masjid, but I'm just there using that space, and then people automatically assume that because you're doing it at that masjid, then you must be affiliated or associated some type of, it's just a lot of politics that are involved with that. But using the spaces outside of the masajid is more comfortable, and it gives room for us to do more, right? Whereas the masajid, you might say something, board member hear you saying it, and I mean that's my narrative. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know how many messages I've been kicked out of. Like, I'm not welcome back. How are you not welcome at a masjid? Because you said something that a board member or an imam or somebody took an issue with, and not that it was wrong, but it was actually right. You know what I mean? And that as a result of that, they don't want you back because you have the potential to wake people up. You know what I mean? You have the potential to make people open their eyes and begin questioning certain things. You know what I mean? And that's not what they want. Yeah, you had to.
In terms of just like when you're speaking about the messages, some of the most sacred Ibadah, right, is in the messages. Like we talk a lot about we're all Muslim. This sense of illusion is not just there because anti-blackness is there. There's racism in there. When people look at you, they don't assume that I speak from the human thing. But it's just like a lot of times the racism that comes and the anti-blackness that comes from the South Asian community is just heartbreaking. It got to a point where I'll walk into a museum, if I see predominantly South Asians, I walk out. This is not a space where I want to be in a fight mode. I want to be comfortable. But then also as a Somali, I hear a lot of anti-blackness from the Somali community towards other believers. You hear it from people who are just like comfortable with you, like, oh, you're a recent African immigrant, so now we can say things about people that we be less Muslim. And that comes from the Arabs and the South Asians too, Africans, and there's also.
So let me say something to that point. While I got you guys here, I took issue some time ago with Caucasian converts spending a lot of their time in predominantly African American masjids and communities trying to teach them Islam. I personally have an issue with that. Not as it relates to race, but I think a Caucasian convert or a white convert would do more justice with his or her Islam in the white community than they would in the black community. As a matter of fact, that's where they need to be, because no one is promoting or propagating Islam in the white community. They're not going to welcome me in, or anyone that looks like me or a darker hue than I am. They're not going to welcome us into their communities. We don't even speak their language. I would have to change the way that I talk, completely, just in order to get my foot in the door. And I'm not willing to do that. Like, I am who I am. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not doing all of that. You know what I mean? So allow them to go into their communities and to begin educating, because when we look at domestic terrorism, when we look at there's no one more dangerous in America today than a white man with an attitude and a gun. And from white converts, you hear absolutely nothing from them addressing what is going on in their communities. What we see is white converts coming into black African American Muslim communities or South Asian communities where, ICNA and ISNA, they adopt them and they become like, their adopted children, and put them on platforms and pedestals just solely on the color of their skin. Meanwhile, I haven't studied anything about Islam anywhere. All right? And meanwhile, there's a huge void there that they are not serving. As well as in the South Asian, Pakistani, Indian community. They are not going to welcome somebody like me to come in and teach them about, what it means to be an African American, a person of color, and things like that, and how they should interact with them. But woke, young South Asian, Pakistani, Indian, young Muslims, and they're out there, they woke, they wear Adidas jumpsuits, they say nigga. Facts. They listen to rap music. But they will never go back to their own communities and teach their parents and grandparents that they cannot refer to a black person as a nigger. They cannot attack a person of color that walks into a masjid that does not have a kufi on. Everybody does not agree with that opinion. Right? I make it a personal note that if I go to a South Asian community to give a khutbah, I do not wear anything on my head. They got a box of kufis right there at the door. Brother, no, I'm not. Did the Prophet wear a kufi? The Prophet wore a turban. So if you're going to practice the sunnah, put a turban on. But don't superimpose something on me because of your own beliefs that are not rooted in anything from the Quran or from the Sunnah. Don't do that. I'm not going to accept it. You understand? If you want to practice the Sunnah, you want to do what Rasulullah did, then wear a turban, because that's what he did do. So the point that I'm making is that when we take issue with a lot of these communities, we should also take issue with the youth in those communities who profess to be woke, and encourage them to go into their communities and educate their communities. Workshops, seminars, to explain to them how anti-blackness, how it manifests in very subtle ways, these microaggressions and how they manifest. They are the only ones that can teach their community. Baba, mama, you cannot refer to an African American or person of color as a nigger. You can't do that. It's unacceptable. And keep in mind, that has to be done with wisdom, because a lot of parents, a lot of uncles and aunties are probably not going to accept that. But at some point, the conversation has to start. Otherwise, we become walking contradictions, because while you're cool with me and you're saying bro and you're wearing a Jeebus tracksuit and you know the latest lingo and slang, but then when you go back to your parents and your grandparents, you put on you put on the Punjabi shirt and and it's all good. No, because now you're playing both sides of the fence. And it's not fair to the justice that needs to be established as it relates to how they interact with people outside of their race.
One of the things that possibly will be looked at to restore the love in the community is muhasabah, self-evaluation of ourselves. To look at ourselves, to look into our heart, and establish how our relationship is established with Allah is good. Because if we don't have that relationship with Allah in a proper manner, we can't give it out. Because the Prophet and his companions, we keep them all. Dawah was given by their character, their manners, and their behavior. So if we get that correct with Allah, we can restore that love and be able to reciprocate that. Without that, we're still going to have these problems.
Anyone else? Yeah.
I was just gonna say I'm a recent convert myself. I'm from a background of Christianity, and one thing that's been the hardest thing for me, other than coming to Center DC, is that going back to my home. It's like I see Muslim brothers at the gym, like they don't talk, and not just like talk, just like hey, what's up? What you saying? But like I'm not married yet, and I'm going through this, and I'm dealing with this.
You're not married?
No.
Okay.
So
we need to fix that. That's an easy fix.
Trust me.
No, that's an easy fix.
But
tomorrow we have something.
But my point is like certain things that I struggle with. It's like a taboo to talk about certain things, and it's like rather have Center DC. Like honestly, like the reason why I did convert was because of Center DC. Because I saw like there's another community that's going through the same stuff I'm going through, but it's like, and even Christianity too. It's wrong to talk about what I do by myself, or it's wrong to think about this this way, and it's like you feel by yourself. So like I'm saying, like I played sports for a long time, like in soccer, basketball, you got to talk on the field. And the problem if our community, especially then who are between ages of 25 to 30, who may not have kids or may not be married, you don't talk. So you feel alone. So when you're thinking something in your head, like, oh man, I shouldn't be thinking like this, or I'm listening to a Kendrick Lamar album, man, I should probably listen to, some scripture or like
right.
one of the prophets.
I got
you feel like so guilty, you can't, or you have that person who's just like they have like it's like not that they're perfect, but they'll show you your weakness, and then when you try to be vulnerable and show what you're going through, it's like, oh, well, that's different from you.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly what I was talking about. You got to be vulnerable, but this other person, not in. Oh, something is wrong with you. Because I'm fine, right? Nothing wrong with. Meanwhile, he's going through the same exact thing, but just afraid to expose that.
So like the word is strong, like the ones who come on and see what Prophet Muhammad did, it's real. But when you feel alone, that's when you're like, okay, well maybe I should, go back to doing this, doing that. Because at least I had, this community, So we need to talk.
And I think the masajid have created this void, because in the masjid you can't talk about certain things. And it's just like, why? It's all part of the religion. It's all relevant. I don't understand why. Right? It's like, oh, you can't say that in the masjid. It's just like, but why? Right? The other thing is the Islamic leadership. Here again, you have people, oh, brother Imam, I want to ask you a question. I don't want to offend you. It's like, no question offends you. It offends me as long as it's not about me personally. You know what I'm saying? If you're just asking a question, I'm going to give you one or two answers. Either I know and I'm going to give you the answer, or I don't know. That's it. But the only way you're going to get a solution to that problem, the only way you're going to get an answer is you have to ask. But many scholars, imams, have put themselves in this place where it's like, no, I'm not asking him that. And it's just like, so where are you going to get the answer if you don't ask him? You know, so yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And this is why spaces like this are important. And I think that, you know, we need to invest in more spaces like this. Just as much as we invest in the masajid, because the masajid are necessary, these places of worship. But when we have our social needs that need to be met, the masajid is not the place to meet our social needs. That's not the place where we go to get our social needs met. A lot of pressure is put on imams that should not be on imams. Imam is not, in many instances, is not a marriage counselor. If he does more damage to marriages than he does helping the marriages, especially if he does not have professional background in that field. They don't. But we automatically assume that because I remember when I became an imam, part of my job description was to do marriage counseling. And I'm just like, all right, I'm going to do it because I was young and silly at that time. But as you get older, you start to realize that this is above my pay grade. This is above me. Especially when you have a couple that comes to you who have been married longer than you've been married. And have children your age. And are having marital problems. And you're like, well, this is totally above me. I am in over my head at this point. And now you start to look for community members who have expertise in that background, in that particular field. Imams are not mental health counselors in many instances. They're not mental health counselors. So a lot of times the imam, you know, just he wants good, but at the same token, desiring good is one thing and actually achieving it is something different. So he wants good and he tells you, well, you need to pray more. Make dua, inshallah. These are just your local generic responses, right? You got a marriage problem, be patient. You got a mental health issue, make dua. We have the one-liners. We're famous for that. And that's supposed to solve all your problems. Meanwhile, you're up to your ears in problems, trying to figure out how in the world do I get at least to move some of the dark cloud out the way so I can see some type of light at the end of the tunnel. You know? And this is part of the problem. So we need, I think, personally, we need to invest in spaces like this just as much as we invest in the masajid. Because they're necessary. This is where we go to get our social needs.
I was going to say too, also, when you convert, that was something I really made you off for, that I didn't have any real friends, like outside the masjid. It's like, Assalamu alaikum, a familiar face. But when I went home, I was back with my friends who were not Muslim, and they were doing not Muslim things, and it was really a struggle for me. So I prayed, but one of the things that really helped me outside of obviously prayer is service. Like, I would start just showing up to stuff. Like, I'm a big believer that if you want something, be the change you want to see. So you start to, like, I started to reach out. That's my friend. It's my friend. It's my friend. It's my mom. Right? And I just came as like the new kid on the block, but I just showed up like, what can I do? How can I serve? Oh, I have an idea. So it's like, if you have an idea, maybe you should talk to him about maybe a brother's meeting or something. You guys can come and talk about social issues and things that bother you so you can get it out in a safe space. But if you have an idea, don't be afraid to pitch it and don't be afraid to facilitate it.
And we need to talk about that marriage situation. we need to square you away, man. Yes.
So a big problem that I've noticed is toxic masculinity within the
Uh-oh. That's his
baby.
Okay, go ahead. Let me hear you out.
But I noticed it's a big problem. And so if you take the wrong person and they try to impose their own toxic masculinity, I'm talking about people like in a place of leadership. It can stray, I mean, I'm talking about experience as a woman, it can stray some women away from Islam. And it can teach them to hate themselves. And I've seen actually women that are more misogynistic than men. I mean, mentality.
Yeah.
I come from so I'm originally Yemeni, and so I know a lot of Yemeni women whose mentalities are more problematic than I've seen in men. And it's like it teaches them to hate themselves. And so they act accordingly. They can't give love to people. It's like what you said, if you can't give love to yourself. Like, they just view themselves naturally as a lower person. They don't know their own rights. They don't have that like education. And so something that I've struggled with as a woman is finding that access even within the Muslim community to learn. I want to learn, I want to grow, but I see with men, like they have that access. They can go study under a man. They can, but as a woman, like for example, I recently with my best friend, we went to Georgia. We went to this like institute. Sorry, I had to put it on. We went to this institute, and it was beautiful, and we wanted to get the chance to speak to this imam, like everyone's been telling us about him. So we go, we're excited, and next thing you know, he's surrounded by a bunch of men. And then one of the brothers told him, like, hey, like, there's these sisters that have been wanting to talk to you. Like, they came through. And he's like, yeah, definitely. Like, I'm going to speak to them soon and answer all questions that they have. Next thing you know, they're all just chilling, like, drinking tea, and just like, oh, sorry, I never got to them. And it's just, like, all the men, like, together, and they see the woman. It wasn't just me and her. It was, like, a bunch of women waiting to just speak to. They have questions they need to answer. We don't have that access. You know, and these same men, it's not like it was a one-time thing. Like, the people in the community, they're like, oh, yeah, I didn't do this every single night. And they couldn't, like, take, like, 5 minutes just because they're just so used to chilling like that. We don't get that access, you know?
It's a privilege. It is. It is. I mean, I don't necessarily like to use, I do know that, not necessarily masculinity, but the patriarchy, this where the man feels that he is entitled. I don't think that has anything to do with masculinity. I think that's just that position of patriarchy. All right, so I like to use the word toxic patriarchy rather than masculinity, because there are times when masculinity needs to be, you know what I mean, in the forefront, where it has to be very aggressive, and that's necessary. All right, but to your point, yes, and I have been advocating for sisters to come forward, to start creating spaces for sisters. Not just that, but let me tell you something else that happens. And I mean, just being in the positions that I am in. Sometimes sisters send you emails. They DM you. And Allah forbid those sisters have had horrible experiences with men, husbands, ex-husbands, or boyfriends, or whatever the case may be. And then they see you in this position. A lot of times they'll gravitate towards you because they believe that you represent the solution to all of their problems. And if, as a man, as a leader in that position, if you are not strong enough to see that woman and all of her pain and her hurt and be able to see through all of that, you'll fall victim to that and you'll take advantage of her, and then you'll perpetuate the same pain and hurt that, you know, and the trauma that she's already going through. Sure. And so a lot of times, you know, imams, they get put in very vulnerable situations, and some of them succumb, unfortunately, because they're not wise enough to see that this woman doesn't want you for you. She wants you because she believes that you represent her Superman. You are going to solve all of her problems. You are going to make it all go away. And in his mind, he's not seeing that. He just sees, she wants me. She sends me a DM. She definitely wants it. She can get it. You know what I mean? You understand? Facts. I mean, we all adults here. I'm speaking facts. And what ends up happening is that part of her really wants to be with him, and a part of her just wants that fantasy satisfied, but really wants to learn. And so I think men teaching women, or men being imams and women sitting underneath him, if that person is not grounded in himself, that is a very dangerous situation. So it speaks to the point that women need to step forward and create their spaces to avoid women having to be subjected to that. No woman should have to be subjected to this man's toxic patriarchy, you know, trying to sift through whether or not he can really teach her or not, and she just wants to learn her religion. No woman should have to be subjected to that. She should be able to go in with a clear heart, clear conscience, learn her religion without being subjected to any man's toxicity. And not being judged, because some men might see you as some hurt, poor little girl who just needs a Superman. And I'm that Superman. I'm going to solve all your problems for you. You understand? And I'm just telling you, this is that self-delusion This is that narcissism. That many imams, students of knowledge, they get caught up in that. Yeah, I remember one imam said to me a long time ago, he's like, my problem was with women. He's like, he said, I thought that every woman who came in my office who had a problem, the solution to her problem was me. Just marry me, I'll solve all your problems. And that was just me and him having a real conversation. Years later on in his experience and him coming to that realization, like, damn, like, I wasted a lot of my years, that I could have been servicing the community, believing that I was every woman's Superman. And it's very easy to get caught out. And we've seen public instances, I ain't got to mention no names, you already know. We've seen public instances where that has happened. And all of it starts as a result of a woman seeking assistance from a man and him not being comfortable with himself and where he is and being able to service her the way that she needs to be serviced. So I'm appealing to sisters who have knowledge, who have completed courses, have completed whatever, even if it's online. Create spaces wherein you can share information with other sisters. And sisters should seek out other sisters. I think a lot of times women don't seek out other women. You have a plethora of women available that have a little bit of knowledge here and there. She might not be mutabahara. She might not be an ocean of knowledge and has knowledge on every single subject. But you, as a seeker of knowledge, you got to go to this person, until you get the answer that, that is going to satisfy you, right? But I think a lot of times women don't go to other women because there's this element that the man has to, even with myself, like, oh, Shadi Muhammad said it, it's all good. But another sister just said the same thing, right? Why does it have to come from me? Why do we idolize the imams and Muslim men speakers to such a degree where the only information that can be sound is that it has to come from the mouth of a man? And that's a farce. That's not real. Because you have many sisters out here who speak truth, much truth. Yeah.
Just speaking to what she said about like the older women, and I find this a lot as well. There's a lot of older women who have been broken by this patriarchy. And so they'll see you in your youth and all the stages that you're going through, and they'll see that as a brokenness in you. Like, no, you need to just conform. You need to be quiet. You need to do, certain things. And they have a lot of impact. And I think that's just, I know you said your background was Yemeni, but that's not just particular to that background. It's with the African Americans as well. That brokenness, for some reason, they want to pass that on. And, it contributes to our brokenness.
Okay, just on the last question.
Okay.
Based upon everything out here, it seems like the biggest problem with the lack of education. It means that the community as a whole just needs to be re-educated to understand that women have a place, men have a place, kids have a place. And I'm very nervous. That's kind of where I fit, because I homeschool. I homeschool all of my kids, from the oldest, who's now 27, all the way down to the youngest, who's 5 currently. And that's what I see. Even when talking to other homeschoolers, it's like it's just a lack of education. Everybody wants to go for this thing or that thing without realizing that Islam really has it, and it's there. It's already there. We don't have to keep searching for it and seeking for it and looking for it. We already have it. We just actually have to use it.
Definitely want to thank Imam Shadi Muhammad for coming out here and bringing his family also. Before we go into the announcements, I got 2 things in my hand that, I want to do a plug for. The Paradox of Change. Now, this one right here is for $20. This is written by none other than Imam Shadi. And also this one right here, He Came to Perfect Moral Character. This one is for $15. These books, we don't have one for everyone. This one is $15. This one is $20. There's some on the table, first come, first serve. So definitely hit up the table before leaving and try to get a book. With that, I'd like to invite my wife, Lauren Stracker, who is the executive director of CTC. She did not want to do this, but I just, like picking on her.
Assalamualaikum. All right, so one of the things we like to do to check out is just, we're going to do a go around, and so if everybody can say one word, sort of like what you're leaving with, or like what your takeaway is, anybody can start and just pass it to your right or your left. If you don't have a word to say, you can just say pass. And anyone can start. Oh.
Change. Happiness. Empowered.
Love. You can't have too much love.
All right. The floor, can you say it one more time?
Self-examination, hustle.
Oh, nice.
And
Inspiration.
Gratitude.
Peace. I was gonna say love, so.
So you can also say love.
Love.
Yes.
You can't have too much love. Love.
empowered.
Forgiveness.
Marriage.
The more you receive.
Marriage.
No pressure.
No pressure.
We'll go back in the corner here. Yeah. Okay.
Community.
Community.
Character.
In the outside, one word. How are you guys doing? Check out. Compassion. Community. One word. Or pass. You can pass.
Faith, I don't know.
Faith. Is there anybody else out there? Two more. Slow down. Wiser. And agreement. Anybody else? Did you have a word to say?
Self-reliance.
Self-reliance.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, that's your baby.
We also, in terms of like check out for announcements, Center DC has a bunch of events coming up. Mohammed just handed me this really overwhelming calendar that's on our Facebook page. One thing I guess to note is we're doing a potluck iftar to try to encourage people to fast for Shawwal on Monday the 24th. We also are doing our signature like community building event on the 30th called Fellowship, where we just sort of get together, we do icebreakers, we get to know each other, we don't talk about job titles and that sort of thing, just like to be with each other. We actually have somebody coming in to do an improv workshop with us. Louis is coming, for those of you who know Louis, to do some improv with the community, which is going to be cool. And are there any other announcements that anybody else has to share, or things that you want people to know about?
I have a question though. How do you find your information? Are you on Instagram?
Yeah, you can go to my Instagram page, Shadid Muhammad, Facebook, Shadid Muhammad /role.admin. And then usually all of my lectures, if I do anything, I stream it live on Periscope. On Periscope, my tag is Shadid_M76.
So that
SHADEED. Shadid_M76. That's my Twitter as well as my Periscope tag. And all of the videos are uploaded to my YouTube channel, www.rawdah, RAWDAH, on YouTube.
Also, I have a new sisters group now.
Hey.
Nice. Up and running for a year. We're new Shahadas and Seasoned Sisters. The name is Al-Rahman. We're based in DC. So if anybody wants my number or any other sisters somewhere over here, we meet once a month.
So what about sisters that are outside the Maryland, D.C. area?
Yes, we're based in DC, but we have Baltimore. We have 2 sisters that come from Atlantic City, Philadelphia. We started with 7 sisters last year. We're up to almost 40. So we had to rent out a bigger space. We got a space for iftar over at St. Elizabeth. We couldn't find a spot. We used the old building, but we outgrown it now.
Beautiful. We got another announcement.
One more at our hospital. We had the new Shahada class going on every Sunday. And we're still doing it. I'm now doing the class online. So if anybody's interested in doing that class, we do it by pre-conference call. It's pillars of faith, conditioned pillars of salah, and we cover a lot of other things. We're getting ready, we're just finishing up with the book, important lessons for every Muslim, and we're getting ready to go into the series of conversation. So anyone when you get that number, you can call in, it's on pre-conference.
Anything else? All right, so the other thing we like to do to close out is a thing we call community dua. So I'm going to kind of like open up with some prayers to make, and then I'll get quiet, and then you all will have some opportunities to sort of popcorn them out for duas that you'd like to make. Just taking advantage of the time for us to be gathering with one another. We're surrounded by angels, and like this is the time when, inshallah, then our duas will be answered, and we can support each other in those things that we like to pray about. So I'll just start out, and then when I get quiet, I'll sort of look up, and if people have things that they'd like to say, you can just say it, and people can feel free to like make dua silently or like say ameen or whatever you're comfortable with. Does that sound okay? All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. All praises and thanks are due to Allah, the most merciful, the one who knows us better than we know ourselves, who is closer to us than our own jugular vein. We thank you for providing us with the opportunity to gather and to be surrounded with people of knowledge and with a community of knowledge and with people who are supporting us and loving us. We ask that you send peace and blessings upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all of the people in between him that allowed the message of Islam to arrive to us. We thank you for this. We thank you for all of the things that you've provided us with, the things that we have forgotten about. We thank you for those things, for our health, for our sustenance, for our income and the opportunities that we have. Ya Rabbi, we thank you for those. We also ask that you be gentle with us and that you surround us with love and allow us to make it easy for us to love others, Ya Rabbi. We ask that you create openings in our hearts so that even people who are difficult, that we love them, and that when we're teaching people and sharing information, that we do it from a place of love, Ya Rabbi. We ask that if there are imperfections that we have, that you correct those imperfections, Ya Rabbi. We ask that you guide us along the straight path and that you keep us near to you and close to you and continue to bless us and surround us with people who have us reminded of you. Ameen. And for anybody else who's got du'as that they'd like to add on, be it personal or otherwise, please.
اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا صالحا متقبلا وألسنة شاكرا ذاكرا وقلوب خاشعا. Oh Allah, we ask you for beneficial knowledge and provision that is halal and righteous actions and a tongue that is grateful and that remembers you. And we ask you for hearts that fear you and that revere you.
Oh Allah, if there are any other du'as that are on our hearts, we haven't uttered them out loud, Ya Rabbi, we ask that you answer those du'as with even better than we could ask for. Ya Rabbi, we ask that you bless our families, that you bless our parents, that you bless and protect our children, that you bless and protect those of us who are new to Islam or who are struggling with any kind of illness, whether it's mental or physical. We ask that you alleviate those from any burden that people carry and protect our people. Ameen. We ask that you send peace and blessings upon your beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we'll close out with Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.